You're listening to the Second Time Watches podcast with your host, OJ the OG.
Welcome to the Second Time podcast. I'm your host, OJ the OG. We've got a really special episode today, filming from WatchBox Studios, and here with my very good friend, Tim Mosso. Welcome, Tim. Welcome to the Second Time podcast.
It's a riot to be back with you, OJ. It's like old times.
I am so grateful to have you on here. Like, really, it's just amazing when I think about our journey, when I think about your journey, where I think about, the first day you came into the WatchUWant offices, circa, I think, 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, back in the old days, I was just out of the Navy, and so it was really just my first shot at something. I had some jobs lined up writing headlines for cable news channels in New York, and I'm like, well, why not try for the dream job?
Yeah.
I had sort of like the dutiful thing that I did, and then I'm like, well, I've got a real job lined up in media if this doesn't work out, so let me just see if this hobby could become a job for a few months.
And so that's what I want to focus on today and I've said this in numerous podcasts, but you truly are a superhero of the watch world. If there was a superhero, you are that superhero. And as I say, every superhero has a great origins story.
I was a middle-class kid growing up. We were in my grandma's basement at the very beginning, and so I was watching all the broadcast channels, and broadcast TV in the late 80s meant a lot of old cartoons. So Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Mickey Mouse would all wind their watches. And, this was the era of quartz at its peak, and so there were some watches around the house, and I would pick them up and try to wind them, and I'd wonder why they just kept turning. Even as a kid, I'm like, well, why doesn't this work like Bugs Bunny? And, of course, kids don't know about quartz,
Sure.
but they know about Looney Tunes. So that was probably the beginning of it.
So do you remember those watches that were laying around the house, like what they were?
What I remember was that they were plastic, so they were Swatch watches.
They were Swatch watches, sure.
My dad had a red LED of some description, but what I remember most about that is the extensible steel spring-loaded bracelet.
Oh my God, the Seidel or whatever, the Spidel, that would the hair ripper, right? It would tear the hair off of your arms.
That was the greatest thing on earth to me. That was cooler than a slinky. That was like the anti-slinky. Yeah, but I remember the bracelet, and I remember my dad had this red LED watch, and I remember just taking the bracelet and doing this, and I was transfixed. So fast forward to about, I'd say, 1991.
Okay.
And
so in 1991, how old are you?
Okay, 1991, I am just not quite 7, but I'm getting there.
Okay.
Early in the year.
7 years old. All right.
My grandpa, who ate a heroic amount of Wheaties, he sent off a number of box tops, and he got this like very cheap multifunction watch, and to me that was the end of the world. And so that was the first watch that I actually had. I wish I still had that. We've moved the house 3 times since then. My parents have moved my old stuff around. I wish I had that box top watch. But
So
that
it was a
Wheaties
Wheaties digital multifunction?
It was something my grandpa got by saving Wheaties box tops. And I think that tenuous connection was that, that was the breakfast of champions.
Sure.
And this was some sort of like sports-oriented watch. So I don't know if it was a Timex Ironman, because that almost sounds too good for a box top watch. But it was something like that in the early 90s. And so that was the first watch. And after that, I had a multifunction Armatron that my mom bought me at Kmart. And
so the Armatron was like the poor man's G-Shock.
It was. And as a kid back then...
Can you imagine? Like the poor man's G-Shock.
Well, I couldn't get the calculator watch because that was like a couple of dollars more.
Right.
So at Kmart, you could get the Armatron or you get the Casio calculator.
Yeah,
I wanted the calculator, but my mom's like, Tim, you don't know how to use that. You're not going to need that for years.
Well, not only that, if you remember how freaking small the buttons were, that's why I went to the Casio Melody Matic or Melody Maker with the Happy Birthday and 9 different songs, and it had a stopwatch. And that was a service merchandise purchase circa 1980, 83, something like that.
And I can't imagine anyone. It's funny because there are tests where, in my lifetime, they would say, like, does anyone here have a calculator watch?
Right.
And, you weren't allowed. It's like, who the heck's going to, like, sit there with a toothpick, like, let me, like, figure out this quadratic equation here. So it was a funny thing because in theory, it could do a lot. In reality, it could do almost nothing.
Sure.
So
Sure.
the Armatron was a better bet, and
Yeah.
I figured out
Wait,
how to
was
set
it one
the
of those?
alarm.
Was it one of those solar ones?
No, they didn't have that at that point. In fact, they didn't even have like all the electroluminescent features. It had a little light on one side.
Right. You
with
hold
the-
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hold
You'd
the button in.
It would burn down the battery, and you'd light about, you could see what the hour was, but not the minutes. But that
Sure.
seemed very cool to a kid. So I learned how to do two things. I learned how to set the alarm, and I learned how to operate the light. All the other functions to this day, they mystify me. I never figured it out. But that was the first watch, I think, that got me excited about all these different things watches could do. Because the grandpa watch, I had no idea. He said it for me once, and that was it. But, I think I sort of had this bug planted that watches were cool little machines, and the more they could do, the better. And I think that's sort of where I get my inborn love for complications. I've never been that, like, field watch guy, that two-hand guy. I've never been that no-date guy. I love complications.
You
to
love
this
the
day.
complications. All right, so we've got that Armatron, and we're 7 years old or so. And what comes after that?
Well, after that, we have a long fallow period where I got to admit I didn't really have a watch, even though I loved them. So roughly the mid-90s, I start seeing people with G-Shocks around. And the peak of this was when we brought over some, in like my middle school days, we brought over some Japanese like summer exchange students. And they came over for 2 weeks in the summer, and they all had G-Shock watches that I'd never seen. All Japanese domestic market stuff.
Oh, sure, yeah, JDM, man. That
so-
was the beginning of it, right?
Yeah, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, this is really, really cool. And, I asked my parents, like, could I get one? And they're like, well, I don't know, we'll see what happens, for Christmas. And, 1998, I get a G-Shock watch, and I'm thrilled. And
1998 G-Shock.
that was...
Was it one of those colored ones, or was it?
It was green, and it was black, which was a good combo because I love green, and black's kind of universal. And they had these weird little like cuffs on, these little plastic cuffs on the side of it, which I guess they were supposed to assist the ergonomics, but they just looked weird. This had a lot of functions now. I could use this for things that I was doing. Sports, timed tests. Now we have Indiglo, or we have something like it.
Sure.
Whatever the Casio variant of electroluminescent is. So we've got Indiglo, and now I've got 2 time zones, I've got a calendar, and most of all, I can set like a countdown if I have to take a PSAT or an SAT or something. So this is the watch I wore through high school, and I would say about early in my senior year, my grandfather had passed away in 1996. And I knew he had old watches, and he was an impressive guy. He was a repairman, expert in electronics, mechanics, did work on his own watches, even though he wasn't trained. I knew there were mechanical
But
watches.
you'd consider him kind of like a gearhead. He'd like to take stuff apart and put it back together.
Mm-hmm. Lawnmowers, cars, watches, all that stuff. And
Did you assist him with that kind of stuff?
I would watch. I would take stuff apart. He would put it back together. And that's sort of how that started.
Sure.
But
And did he work on cars too?
Oh, he worked on everything. And big engines, small engines, like back in the 50s when, this was like very entry-level, middle-class Levittown. Every man on the street pitched in to buy a Briggs & Stratton lawnmower in 1957, 58, 59. And so each week a different house would have the lawnmower. And he was the last man standing with the lawnmower because he was the last one alive, and he was the only one who could fix it. So he had this lawnmower that was like older than my Aunt Kathy, and it was still working. And he would show
It
me
was like a push mower, right?
yeah, exactly.
It wasn't electric, or it wasn't gas powered. It was push.
No, he'd be like, here's the carburetor, here's the fan system. It's a single cylinder, it's a flathead, so it's got the valve in the block. He'd show me all that stuff, and he'd get it going again. And the watches, we knew he had watches because I saw them when I was a little kid. But he passed away on a road trip, and so he just kind of disappeared, and so did his watch. I found it in a drawer my senior year of high school, and I was just looking through the drawer hoping I could find some knickknacks. It was just like a junk drawer. And I find an Omega Seamaster. It's a DeVille Seamaster, and it's got my grandpa's name on the back.
No kidding.
And 25 years.
So is this like a
Remington-
gold plate one or a steel one?
10 karat gold filled, back
Sure.
when they had gold
Yeah,
filled.
yeah, like 36 millimeter or 34 millimeter.
Plastic crystal, and it was like the dial was immaculate. You could tell this watch was worn and worn constantly, but the guy opening it knew what he was doing, and the guy handling the hands knew what he was doing. And so I'm just like shocked.
And this was automatic, yeah?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I think it was like a caliber 565, and so and it was in good shape too. So I found this.
Was it? You remember what kind of color dial it had?
Oh yeah, I still have it. It's silver. It's brushed top to bottom, and
Was it like a pie pan?
No, it was probably the cheapest Omega you could get at the time, given that it was gold filled, and it was probably U.S. cased because that was sort of the way back then. You know, you'd get a knockdown kit for like an entry level, you know, dial, hands, and movement, and then it would be cased up like, you know, DNA or Star Watch or something like that. And you know, gold filled was a very American thing, so it was 10-karat gold filled.
Right. It always had that steel case back, so you knew it. Right?
And you know, the funny thing was, it was for I used to think it was his retirement watch, but it was 25 years working for Remington Electric Shaver. They gave him a watch for hitting a work milestone, not for quitting, not for being done, but just for a quarter century. Well done. And I'm shocked by this, and so I wore that through the end of the year, and you know, the time came where I was.
So that was just on like a leather strap?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I had to replace it almost. I kept the original strap because it was his, but it was unserviceable. But I kept it for sentimental reasons. So beautiful watch, and I take it down to a local jeweler. They service it. They give it back to me, and you know, it's working great. The end of the year arrives. Senior year, we're just about done.
So this is what year?
This is 2002.
2002. Okay.
And so I've been wearing Grandpa's watch for most of the year. Very proud of that. And graduation is approaching, and now I've got this idea. Okay, I've discovered gray market watches. Okay. So I found.
So 2002, we've got the internet, we've got eBay, we've got. That's really about it. I mean, there's a couple of websites like Aster Live. Like, do you remember any of the websites you used to see when you were looking? Well, you were on the computer, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, all the websites back then. Here are the 3 websites that I was on in the early days, like 2000, 2001, 2002. Chronocentric, which was very Omega oriented.
Okay.
And obviously Time Zone, which was
well, they had all the forums, they had the brand forums, they had the trading forums.
They had the trading forums. They had like the entry level trading forums, and then they had like the featured trading forums.
Right.
So yeah, for the higher end watches. And then the other was the very earliest versions of the purists.
Sure. Oh, Thomas Mao.
Yeah, and
Thomas Mao. Well, Thomas Mao took over Panaristi.com once upon a time.
You see, I discovered them too. My first year of college in the fall of 2002, I had a titanium PAM 40 on the desktop of my old Dell.
Dude, the PAM 40 is about one of the rarest, aside from this watch that I'm wearing here, which they only made 10 pieces of, the PAM 40 was like, what the heck is that? You remember it?
It was almost unadvertised.
It was basically an Amerigo Vespucci with a black dial.
Yeah, and it was
right?
It was so slick, and I remember the way it looked. The grayscale, the brushed finish, the titanium cool, and it was that classic Betterini tuna case. Luminar.
Yeah,
it wasn't like a 1950.
the classic Luminar. Yeah, didn't have that bowl. No. It was straight across.
And I had that on my desktop. So I'm like,
PAM
this is the
40.
incentive. The PAM 40. Someday you could have this if you work hard. And so that was there to remind me. It wasn't.
So that PAM 40 was your aspirational watch in 2000 and what was it? 2?
It was 2002, and that year I used like most of my graduation money to buy a laptop computer as I went off to college, and to buy the original James Bond Omega Seamaster 253180. Yeah.
I love the 253180.
I got it for $1,750 on a gray market dealer on the internet, and it wasn't a Costco special either because it had all the serial numbers.
No, they didn't have them scratched out.
Back when they had that,
Back in the day, they used to scratch that shit out.
If you got the Costco, the dealer wanted to cover his tracks, so you'd get this Costco watch and be like, "Where'd it come from?" Switzerland. That's where it came from.
By the way, that was one of the landmark copyright infringement and importation cases in the luxury watch space that kind of set the tone for you can do this, but you can't do that.
I wanted to know, that I wasn't getting one of those because I knew they were out there even then. So I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to get. I hope, I'm sending my money to an internet retailer of gray market Omegas. And it's like, I hope something real comes in the mail.
Yeah.
And then years later, I held my breath when I sent it in for service for the first time in like 10 years later. And I'm like, gee, I hope this comes back from Omega because, if I find out a decade later that my graduation watch was fake, I'd be pretty bummed.
So what's really interesting about that is like, at that point in time, the definition of gray market was you couldn't read the serial numbers. The serial numbers were scratched off. That was the definition of gray market, having nothing to do with warranties or anything else. It was, well, does it have? Are the serial numbers viewable?
Yeah, and that was normal back then. That was back when you'd still have brands with websites to the effect of, the website was like an online business card. Be like, no real XYZ is ever sold on the internet. I'm like, oh, well, hope mine's real.
Can you imagine? Don't. If you see one of these for sale on the internet, contact us immediately.
Yeah, they were trying to shut down eBay accounts that were selling like straight up used watches. They were trying to shut those down too. They embraced e-commerce maybe like 10 to 15 years after
man.
America did.
I was persona non grata amongst the brands for the first 15 years of, probably still now, right? Because they always saw me as I was the pirate, and the authorized dealers were the Navy.
You were like a better advocate for a lot of these brands, so there was some envy there.
I put more freaking watches. I put more Panerais on people's wrists than Panerai did, for God's sake.
And the other fun thing too is like people don't realize WatchUWant.com started as the name of an eBay account. It wasn't actually a .com until quite a few years later.
Absolutely. No, it was a .com. It was just that the website was click here to view my watches on eBay.
Yes. And then,
But
eBay,
I always secured the domain.
Yeah,
had the domain
had the
secured in 2002.
And eventually there was a contretemps with eBay and, pre-owned watch vendors. After a point, you're like, you know what, I better activate the website just so I've got a second platform.
Well, I had to activate the website when I got kicked off eBay in regards to the $1 million watch that I posted on eBay, the PAM 203.
Yeah, but you're back in business now.
Back in business now.
And you still got the rooster.
And still got the rooster,
That's great too, because I've got all my old WatchUWant gear. I've got the hat, I've got the shirt. I think I wore the same thing to work for 3 years. I had the WatchUWant polo shirt, I had the WatchUWant hat. We were all about branding back then.
Of course we were.
And
we had great gear. That was one thing Shannon, remember, she came from the premium space, so we always had great gear.
If you want to laugh hard, guys, look up my first video online from, it's got to be like August or maybe July of 2014. And I think we've got a logo on the screen. I've got a branded polo. I've got a branded hat. We were trying awfully hard.
And your sunglasses over on the brim of your hat.
that happened, because my thought was like, don't lose them. And, we did that first video when I was on camera, and then for 3 years, no more. It was just my hands. And so in the meantime, I'm like, well, I'm not going to lose a pair of Oakleys. I'm just going to put them on my head. And the idea was never that people would see them. It was just that was around the office when I was indoors. I didn't need sunglasses. But then I started going on camera, and, in 2000, I guess maybe 16 or 17, we start doing these face-to-the-camera type deals. And my thought is just, well, when I'm done with my work at WatchUWant, we'll turn the camera on. We'll do like 30 minutes. And so I looked the same. It wasn't like I was curating this appearance to try to cultivate an image. It was just literally, okay, the real work's done. Let's like do some face to the camera. And that was about 2016. We started doing that, and we bought out the former bank office downstairs.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
In the Sheridan Executive Mall. It's still there.
That was our first podcast studio, man. That's it. 3475 Sheridan Street.
Somewhere in this studio, we've got my original. I think it's the ATEM. It's the last piece of original equipment I bought used from B&H for our first version of the live studio at WatchUWant.
That's too funny. All right, so going back to your journey.
Okay.
You're graduating graduating high school or college when you got the Seamaster?
High school with the Seamaster.
High school with the Seamaster, and you went to college at Connecticut, right? Or somewhere
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Very cold. We dealt with one night when it was negative 30 degrees.
Wow.
And we had a whole week. It was never higher.
It was like a small liberal arts kind of school? Or?
Yeah, it was basically like that. And, the kind of thing was, it was small. It was about 4,000 undergraduate. And we were up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. So we get this, like, scalding cold. And so that's when I learned that it can be nice to have a watch on a strap, because my watch was a bracelet.
Oh gosh,
and so you realize very quickly that in climate extremes, your watch conducts everything to the skin. So that's where I learned I actually had it on a bund for a while for the exact same reason the pilots did.
Right.
Because it would insulate your wrist.
That's the reason for the bund? I never knew that.
Yeah, at altitude, you could fry your wrist or freeze your wrist.
Of course it was. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense now. Very interesting. All right, so you're in college. Are you thinking about, like, watches could be a part of your, future?
I had all the wrong priorities in college. So my thoughts were that I was going to be a lawyer and everything would be geared towards that. Undergraduate studies, the thesis paper I wrote, all this stuff. Where I worked in my first job, I went to a law firm in the finance industry. I wanted to get a look at like securitization finance and like see, mortgage backed and CDOs and aircraft.
So
debt.
at this point, you've gotten your Grail watch, which is that Seamaster, James Bond. Are watches still in your sort of like, filter? Are you aspiring for other watches, or is it kind of like,
I would say watches always competed with cars.
Okay.
And because I realized very quickly after I graduated that watches travel better than cars, I would say once I was into my first job, I was thinking more about watches. And I'd always sort of burned out on them for a very specific reason, which was in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Burnt out on watches?
Yeah, because here's why. It wasn't the watches themselves, and it wasn't the money. Early on, there was not a rich and sophisticated watch culture in the U.S.
Sure.
And so the impression I got from online communities that it was mostly a lot of older men overseas in Europe and Asia, which was not altogether untrue in the 90s and early 2000s.
Sure was,
I thought, this is not for a 22-year-old college graduate because all these people will never relate to you. And so for a little bit, I sort of gave up on it out of college. Even though I was still interested in the watches, I would go to the Tourneau at Penn Station, back when they had a Tourneau at Penn Station.
For sure.
I would stare at all the new stuff coming in. I remember the arrival of the 2007 Milgauss, the launch of the Omega DeVille Hour Vision, like all of these big mid-2000s releases. I saw them all and I drooled over all of them. But I thought, like, this is not for you. The people who are into this are much further along in their lives. They're far away. You'll never have friends who are into this. Until I started seeing younger people, like other paralegals and people in finance, starting to wear watches. And I remember at some point I saw a guy who was 23 with a Reverso in the cafeteria, and I thought, oh my God, I think this is finally landing.
So did you know what you were looking at when you saw it?
I knew what it was because the Reverso is pretty distinctive.
Sure.
What I didn't know until many years later was that it's actually quite well made. I looked at that and I'm like, you've at that point in your life, you're used to Rolexes with stamped clasps. That'll disillusion you pretty quick. Hollow Centerlink bracelets.
A lot of rattle. A lot of rattly.
Tag Heuer bracelets held together by pin sleeves. Stuff like, you see a Reverso case, you're like, oh man, I bet that's like cheap as hell. I didn't learn until many years later when my great aunt took me to Roosevelt Field Mall. She was about 90 at the time. She's like, oh, you like watches? Why don't we go look at them? And so we go in to look at watches. And then about 2008, after 2 years I've been working, in like mortgage finance. And I try a Reverso Duo and I'm like, it's the Grand Tie case. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong about this. This thing feels like a bank vault. And that's when I'm like, this Jaeger LeCoultre thing is really cool. And
did you know how to pronounce it back then?
I was confused
because I always called it Jaeger LeCoultre.
Well, I'm lucky because I'd taken French in high school and then again in college. And the real question for me, it wasn't whether it was Jaeger, it's whether the guy himself would have pronounced it Jaeger or Jaeger. And it was not helped by the fact that at the time the company was training its U.S. and English market sales associates to call it Jaeger. But Edmond Jaeger fled his home of Alsace-Lorraine in 1870 during the Franco-Prussian War, and he fled the Germans and went to Paris. So I strongly suspected at that point he would not have pronounced it Jaeger, and it did.
Because it sounds too German, is that why?
Exactly. Like he considered himself French. He was French, so his name was German, but he considered himself French. So it was Jaeger. And if you were to go to Switzerland, that's how they'd pronounce it. But again, depending on who trains who in like Britain or the U.S. or Singapore or Hong Kong, you might get a Jaeger out of them.
Yeah.
Which is just why if I don't know like how a person pronounces it, I'm just going to call it JLC rather than like try to like upstage.
It's like Porsche versus Porsche.
Exactly.
Because you'll never get it right.
If the guy coming in wants to buy a GT2, he's like, man, I want to buy a GT2 Porsche. You're like, I got all the Porsches you want, man. It's a Porsche kind of day,
Right. Just line up at the door, right?
And so that's like kind of where I was before the military. I was out of college. I was now realizing, and I started to see like weblogs set up by people my age, like Ariel Adams and Ben
I just
Clymer.
want to interrupt for 1 second because I want to contrast this. You had an aspirational watch of the Panerai PAM 40, which is just a random ultra rare watch to begin with. That's a 44 millimeter watch, and the Reverso is the freaking 180 degrees opposite in terms of stature, wrist presence.
And it wasn't like a reversal
Everything.
976 or something like that. Well, the thing is, I was coming off a G-Shock going into
Another
college.
big watch,
So a
43,
Panerai
42
seemed kind of
millimeter
natural
watch.
to me.
Right.
I was used to wearing a watch that was the size of a baby's fist. And so,
Right.
looking at the Panerai, it didn't seem that big from my high school perspective.
Sure.
By the time I have been wearing my Seamaster and Grandpa's vintage watch for a couple of years, I've kind of refined my my sense of size a little bit better. I started realizing that a G-Shock that's huge might be cool, but you're assuming a certain kind of posture, and
Yeah.
you're kind of strutting if you're wearing a really big like luxury watch. And for me at the beginning of my career, that wasn't me, not initially. But I did see just before I went off to the Navy, my great aunt took me over to Roosevelt Field. We looked at watches, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about Jaeger-LeCoultre because I tried that Reverso and it was amazing. And at the
But
Roosevelt
at that time, they've got the
Reverso Squadra.
the round one, the
Master
master compressors.
yeah.
Which like those didn't appeal to you. Just the Reversos did.
Oh no! I did actually get my hands at one point on a Master Compressor Geographic, which is sort of a hybrid of a sports watch, a world time, and a dual time.
And if you talk about complications, like back then, I was a pretty complicated watch. You could turn the knob and the cities
indexing
change.
of the cities felt
Yeah.
super crisp to me, and I think that's
Right.
where I got it in my head. Like, Jaeger-LeCoultre is really something special. And so just before I went off to the Navy, I took that trip to Roosevelt Field where I kind of discovered Jaeger-LeCoultre. And then I also went to get my eyes checked for my MEPS. MEPS is like your pre-military like health screening.
Sure.
Where they'll ask you, like...
Because you wanted to be like a pilot or something, right?
Yeah, at one point, that's what I thought I wanted to do. And so they
So,
wanted...
so this was in between being like working in paralegal and thinking you want to go into law, but
doing
maybe
all
you'd
finance.
be a pilot.
Well, I thought what I would do is I'd join the military and I'd see like what communities were open, because sometimes they have like this needs of the Navy thing, but I wanted to keep my options open. So when I went to MEPS, everything checked out. They did all the physical checks. They ask you questions like, have you ever tried drugs XYZ? And of course, you say no. And, in my case, that was true. In other cases, maybe not. But they wanted me to get a supplementary eye exam. So I went to the Tourneau at the Walt Whitman Mall. They had like a Pearl Vision or something at the Walt Whitman Mall. And I went to get my eyes checked and get a more thorough eye exam to put in my military application. They had a Tourneau there too. This was back when Tourneau was on every corner. And I found this, it was in the used case, so they had pre-owned stuff that they didn't carry new. It was a Zenith Chronomaster Open XXT, and I remember they wanted $5,000 for it, and I remember holding it, and it's big now. This is a big watch.
Yeah, 40. It's like 46. I think it's like 44, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's right in that range, and it's it was barely on my wrist. I'm like, I don't care how big it is. I don't care if it looks right. This is amazing. What would a person have to do to deserve this? I thought, like, you must have to, like, make partner at a law firm or sell your company for $20 million to Kellogg's. I don't know. But I looked at that, and I'm like, I was absolutely in the spell of that thing. And I'm like, someday I'm going to have a real watch like this. Like, not just, like, the kind of thing you see in a department store, but a real luxury watch like this. And that
it's funny that you said that, because up to this point, Omega was like a department store brand, side by side with Tag Heuer.
Yeah, it was coming out of the early 90s. Yeah, you would have seen Omegas and Tag Heuers, maybe like Raymond Weil, that sort of thing.
Right, in the Burdines, in the Macy's, in the Saks, in their like jewelry department.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily the kind of thing that cost as much as a car. Like, now it's very easy to buy an Omega that's 5 figures. Back then it was very uncommon. And one of the reasons I got my Seamaster instead of a Rolex Submariner was I flat out couldn't afford the sub, no matter how much graduation money I finagled by inviting people I hadn't seen in 8, 9, 10 years. So I go into the Navy, and once I am sort of like out doing what I would eventually do, which was I was a military journalist. I was working with public affairs. I took the occasion of I think it was my 25th birthday, to buy a Jaeger-LeCoultre. And
what year was that?
This was in 2000, and I believe it was 2010.
Okay.
And so I was stretching some definitions here. Essentially, I had held open like that birthday gift for a long time. And so technically, I turned 25 in 2009, but I maxed the run in the Navy PRT in 2010, and I'm like, okay, finally you have like an achievement worthy of like buying a watch.
Right,
And
you want to celebrate and
yeah,
reward yourself.
and I'd never been an athlete in high school, so for me to be able to like max a run time, that was pretty cool.
What does that mean exactly? I'm sorry.
Well, beyond a certain point, they keep giving you more and more points for the run. And the PRT may have changed since I was in, but it was push-ups, sit-ups, and it was like a 1.5-mile run when I was there.
What does being in shape have to do with being a PR guy in the Navy?
Not a whole lot, but I think that they want to know that in the Navy you're taking care of yourself.
Sure.
And so, there are bare minima that you have to meet in terms of fitness and weight and like height to weight and body mass index and all that stuff. And, it doesn't matter whether you're, a spook and you're doing like intelligence and you never leave, the Washington, D.C. area, or, your special forces of some kind. You still have, there are physical tests for all of them. And it only really, it changes with age. So after a certain point, they stop giving you extra points. Like, let's say you're like 10 minutes, 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes and 50 seconds. Eventually, below a certain point, they're not going to give you more points for running a 4-minute mile in the Navy. So a normal.
Are you running like 5 miles at a clip, or is this 10 miles at a clip?
It's a short run. It's a sprint. It's
just
like,
a 1 mile deal.
It's 1.5. The Marines would run 3 back then. But I'm like, okay, look, you're in shape. You're more fit than you've ever been in your life. You've got a good job for the first time. You're not.
Are you cycling at this point in your career?
Oddly, no. I'm a runner at this point, and I'd always liked biking. People associate me with my road bike. That was something that really became the focal point of my life after I hurt my knee running. So, cautionary tale, guys: don't run on the road. If you're going to run, do it on a treadmill.
Yeah, but don't bike on the road either, right, Tim?
Yeah, well, I've been hit by 2 cars, but all the lasting damage is from running.
The first week, I remember that you moved to Florida and came to work with WatchUWant. You were on your bike and got clipped in Fort Lauderdale.
Some guy in an F-150 decided to take a right-hand turn without looking.
And in like Hollywood, was it on Sheridan Street or something?
It was right down there. And it was by like the Presidential Plaza. But yeah, so you know.
And that was like the last time you ever rode your bike outdoors. You like set up a system inside on a milk crate. And
I decided to do my morning ride before work on like a trainer and just like watch old races from the 2000s and 90s on my computer. I still rode outdoors on weekends, but I'm like, you know what? These morning hustles are like, there are people out on the road in the morning who are late to wherever they're going and are going to rush things. So I'm like, look, I'm just going to do I'm going to do weekend rides and ride indoors.
And you prove that Florida has the absolute worst drivers on the planet.
Yeah, and I remember when we actually moved up here from Florida, there were a bunch of people who had to sell their cars because they don't have vehicle inspections either in Florida. And so not only are the drivers given a little bit of leeway, but the cars are too. And so we had a bunch of people selling their cars when we moved here to Philadelphia because their cars wouldn't pass Pennsylvania inspection.
The catalytic converters or whatever.
Yeah, Jason Maine with his Evo, he's like, yeah, there's no way that car's going to pass emissions.
That's too funny.
So, yeah, I mean, and at this point now, okay.
All right, so you basically made yourself wait like a year and a half to get that next aspirational watch.
Yeah, I waited until once I was out of the Navy, I had saved up for the black dial white gold Duomet. And so I had been, slowly accumulating JLC watches up to this point. And so I bought the white gold JLC Duomet, which was a 200-piece that came out in 2010, I believe. I always liked the original Duomet, and I thought it was
This is the round one, right?
Yeah.
This was the special edition one.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
It was white gold.
White gold,
and it had
black
like
dial.
some yellow accents or some gold accents. Yeah, I remember that watch from your collection.
The yellow gold hands told the chronograph time, and then the white gold hands told the clock time.
Right.
And so I loved the original.
And there was
Duomet.
like separate power reserves on each one.
For each side, because you could wind it. There was 2 barrels. It was like a Grand Sonnerie. And so you had this like Victorin Piguet styled movement by JLC, but it was for a wristwatch. And
so I remember this watch. And so this watch was released probably around 2010-ish.
And I saved up for it for 4 years.
And they had the duometer lunaire and the duometer chronograph or something like that.
Mine
or
was
the duograph.
Mine was the chronograph.
Right.
And so you had a separate powertrain and a separate power source for the clock time and the chronograph time. And so the idea was that unlike every other chronograph where you activate it and you lose 30 degrees of amplitude, this would double the power when you doubled the power drain. And so, I'm like, okay, well, put up or shut up. I ran a couple of tests, and it would consistently gain about 1 second a day with or without the chronograph running. So it did what it said on the box, and I was impressed by that.
So you bought this watch, the Jaeger, and it wasn't a reverso at this point because you had already had a reverso at this point.
I had a reverso. It was the reverso Duo Night and Day. So it was a white gold
the Night and Day, yeah, of course.
black dial. It had a night and day indicator on the the front and then on the back.
And it's essentially a GMT.
Yes, exactly. With an AM PM and
Right.
and a power reserve. It was an interesting watch.
That was a great watch. It was manual winding too,
And
as I
white
recall,
gold. It was
which
white
drove
gold
me
black
crazy.
dial. It had hand painted Breguet
and they
numerals.
only made it in white gold, if I recall.
It was
correct.
a lovely piece. And
Or
I
rose
had
gold.
I had to search quite a bit because my sort of formula was black dial and white metal case, whether that was titanium, steel, white gold, or platinum. And I wound up owning every single one of those metals. So
I remember that. So your first Jaeger was this reverse?
No, the first Jaeger was the Navy watch after the run. And look,
So
I knew,
what was that?
I knew
Oh, that
guys-
was the
yeah.
that was the duometer.
No, that was the Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm, which is an example of why.
Oh God, I love that.
This
watch.
is
That's
why
a beast.
As a kid, and I consider a 25-year-old to be a kid at this point in my life.
Yeah.
You really need to see a watch before you buy it. I'm like, wow, it's an alarm and it's a world time and it's got 2 straps and it can go in water. This watch does everything. And I
Was
get
this
it.
the blue or the red version?
It was the blue one. It
blue
wasn't.
one.
It wasn't the Tourneau because everyone thinks the blue one is
Yeah.
the Tourneau. There was
Yeah.
the Tourneau. Mine was the
and the
Tides of
Tourneaus
Time.
they call the Tides of Time.
Tides of
I was
Time.
going to say the Tides of. So the Tides of Time. I thought that was the Tourneau one.
The Tourneau one was a little bit different. The most obvious difference was the Tourneau had this blue anodized crown that would allow you to adjust the world time system.
Sure.
And mine had a black crown, and then it had these UNESCO World Heritage sites taking the place of certain cities. And so
Okay.
that was
All
the
right.
main. If you see the blue crown, you're looking at the Tourneau. If you see the black crown with the blue, you're looking at the Tides of Time. And it came in this lovely raw wood box.
I remember that. It was gorgeous. It looked like a treasure chest almost.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
It was beautiful. It was cherry wood.
And had a quick release system for the lugs. And then they said
That was back when we didn't care about the environment.
yeah, exactly. And
Suede leather interior.
gigantic, and theoretically it was like, an environmental benefit special edition, but you quickly learn with watches all that's hypocrisy. And it had this quick release lug system, so I could put the blue strap in or I could put the leather strap in.
And the watch is 46 millimeter. It's one of the
46.4.
largest watches out there. And this is 2000.
This is 2010 now.
2010.
This is before the Duomet. This is before WatchUWant. So the
And
other
this is
thing,
bossie they released the yellow Rossi
the
version.
Rossi, yeah. Which, oh my gosh, that was the slowest selling watch they ever made. I swear, that was still in boutiques like when we were down in Florida.
Yeah.
I want to say that came out sometime around like 2009, maybe.
Really?
And,
They launched the Rossi that early? Yeah, I think you're right. Actually.
and yeah, I remember like in 2015 and 16, those were still in boutiques. And here's the lesson to marketers. If you're going to put some sort of branding or signature on the watch, do it on the back. Always with the car brand, put it on the back. With the athlete, put it, unless it's like Michael Jordan and he's delivering this thing to you, put the branding on the back.
Yeah, and that's, you talk about this. The one thing I remember and being so frustrated about is all I wanted to do was learn and know so I could accurately represent a watch. Oh, is this a Tides of Time? Is this a Tourneau? And they made it virtually impossible to actually know. It's not like you could Google the reference number. And if you call, so they're like, you didn't buy that watch from me. I'm not going to talk to you about watches. Like, we're not even going to tell you the retail price. You got to come into the store and we'll tell you the retail price of the watch.
Yeah, and
Like, it was such a...
it got to the point you were selling brochures at one point because it was so hard to get information. People would pay for a brochure on eBay.
That was how I got started, Yeah. And so 100%, there was such a shortage of the real truth. It was like, oh, I hope. No, because when you came in to WatchUWant was when I would have, we got to ask Tim. He'll know this. And the red,
Yeah, that was kind of funny. Because,
and you became our encyclopedia, of course.
and like on the he was right into the fire. On the second day, we went to a Kiss concert. It was a twin bill with Def Leppard.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was there with Kiss, their tour manager, and then their manager in their motorhome.
That was Doc McGee.
And we had like 40 watches laid down, and it was Tom Suter, who was like the sales manager at the time.
Yeah,
It was
of course.
Shannon, who was the president.
Yep.
And then it was me brought in on day 2, like just over 24 hours into this. Now I'm going to be, like the watch authority guy talking to a dude who was going to be on a GPHG jury about our watches, and it's like, okay.
You remember that? And did you remember meeting Eric Singer, the drummer from Kiss?
Yeah. Again,
And you know what he did? He went on, and I think it was Gerard Perigo made a minute repeater with his special something or other.
like I said, he was on the GPHG jury, the final group of elite people who pick the winner.
Eric Singer.
Yeah, I had to lock horns with this guy on the second day, and
and he was in it too. He was like all in it, wanted to know everything. He's that guy who he'd get in front of you and he would ask you the most detailed questions that no one's ever asked you before. And he was just like a sponge.
Yeah, I have to explain these Singapore edition JLCs right on the spot. And it's like, boy, I hope I got my facts straight with this guy. But it worked out. And it was a confidence-building experience because I don't think the stakes could be much higher than in Kiss's trailer with Kiss in costume. So, yeah, that was day two.
And Kiss had no one other than Eric Singer had any interest in watches.
I will give
of the band.
Their tour manager was kind of cool. He seemed to know that Zenith was run by Jean-Frédéric Dufour, and he had a watch given to him personally.
Was that Doc McGee or was that someone else?
That was actually the tour manager. That was the manager of the tour, of the logistics. He really knew his stuff. And this was literally months before Jean-Frédéric Dufour parlayed his success with Zenith into running Rolex.
Right.
So he was still running Zenith at the time, and so that was name dropped when he was showing me his Chronomaster Open. And so that was but on the other hand, I got all access passes to a concert of Kiss and Def Leppard.
Backstage and all, you know?
You got to hear the whole Kiss set, the whole Def Leppard set, in the front row, backstage, Kiss in makeup, in costume. It was pretty great. That was day two.
Yeah.
I should have known. And
day two at WatchUWant.
and, then, for the next 3 years, it was just hustle. It was South Florida. It was Chicago.
It was
LA.
us put Tim in front of people who had nice watches, and you could tell them more about their watches than they ever knew.
Yeah, and so I started doing the videos the way I did them because I wanted it to not be about me. I found that there were a lot of people talking about watches on YouTube at the time, but a lot of it was just, the guy's face dominating the picture and the watch almost too small to see, or it was 30 minutes on a Tudor Black Bay. And, I'm just like, well, let me just focus on just the watch and just the facts and see if I can just explain this thing in 5 to 7 minutes. And then a person can watch this video. And that was the video I wanted to watch. I wanted to create the video.
And that was the Tim Mosso Talking Hands videos.
Yeah, and I'm glad you remember I called them the Talking Hands back in 2014.
I totally remember that. Yeah.
2014, I called them that.
I can't even believe I remember that.
No, it's good you do because some people have appropriated that term. So yeah, so
I'm just going to go back for a second because I'm still thinking about this duometer. The duometer was like a $20,000 watch, wasn't it?
I got it. This is crazy. I only ever bought 2 watches new. One was the Tides of Time, which was I think retail $16,000, and I paid $11 for it.
Oh, you paid from Tourneau?
Oh, from London Jewelers.
From London Jewelers in Manhasset.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And I think I bought it from a guy named Henning Witte or something like that. So Henning, if you're still out there, thanks. But then the second watch was the Duomet, and it was the weirdest thing because I got $20,000 off the list price. I had some hustlers in New York who were willing to get it for me gray market. I think it was Ashford or something.
And the year of this is 2012, you said?
This is 2000. This is 2014.
Tides of Time was 10?
2014 because it was for my 30th birthday, and I'd saved for 4 years for this.
And you're at WatchUWant at this point, yeah?
Exactly. And so what happened was...
I think I remember us helping you get this watch.
It was very bootleg. So, again, one of those things where I'm sending money to a bank account on the other side of the Atlantic, and I hope I get something. It's back to that feeling with my first Omega. I hope I get what I'm paying for.
Yeah.
And so what happened was...
Was it coming from a dealer? Or
it was coming from an Italian gray market dealer, but they said that it would have a filled warranty card, and that it would come from an AD. So I'm like... You pays your money, you takes your chances. So I wired the money, and sure enough, I got a box with a declared value of so little I'm not going to mention it, with a declared content of a quartz watch that was a repair return on a plastic strap. So basically, they lied in every single way you could lie.
Right. Harmonized store code 9101 point. Like,
so
it was quartz.
And so I had to sign this like Department of Homeland Security form. And then when I saw it was like declared, I'm like, uh-oh. But yeah, so anyway.
That was always a crapshoot, man. You would just hold your breath, hope, and pray.
And it got held up in customs too, and I'm like, oh God, they caught me. But then they didn't. And the Italian like importer that sent it over actually like sent paperwork to clarify, and it got released.
I didn't remember who the name of the dealer was.
No, the funny thing is, it was from some dealer in the Netherlands. So there was the Italian company that sold it to me, and then there was the authorized dealer in the Netherlands that actually retailed it. And true to their word, the Italians sent me the thing with the AD's name on the card, filled out as of the day I wired the money.
Right.
And eventually I noticed there was a fingerprint on the movement. So I'm like, I held my breath and I went to Boca Raton to Meisner Park to the JLC
of course.
dealer.
Les Bijoux.
Exactly.
Les Bijoux. Greg and Simon. They had like 5 doors. They had Richard Mille.
And
they had Jaeger, Panerai, Hublot, and
they had Roger Dubuis at one point. They had,
I think Dior.
and then right next door was
they had
like
Roger
East
Dubuis.
Coast Jewelers.
And East Coast Jewelers
Yeah,
is right next door. Exactly.
And so, so I went in and I got I'm like, I hope this warranty's real. And yeah, they honored it. They took it back. They honored the warranties filled in by that, Northern European dealer. And I got, the watch back, and they're like, we regret that, this inconvenience. They sent me a spare strap, for my trouble. And
oh my God! And straps were
Yeah, and I got $20,000 off the watch. I effectively bought it new with a warranty which was tested and honored.
Yeah.
So I learned that if you pull strings online, great things can happen. And so
that's amazing.
That was the second watch and the only watch, along with my Tides of Time, I ever bought new. Everything else was from another collector or a pre-owned dealer.
No kidding. Wow. So you've got the Speedmaster, you got the Jaeger Reverso Grand Tie. Now you got the Jaeger. I say it Jaeger, mind you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's approved. It's Richemont approved for an English-speaking market.
JLC. The other thing, I hated writing that freaking name out because I never knew the capital and the dash, and I still can't even remember because it's like Jaeger, and then there's no space with a big L and an E with a dash and a coutre.
Yeah, it's like they combined the article and the name for Le Coult. But so
that's what drove me crazy. All right, here's a trivia question for you. Do you remember the special edition World Timer chronograph they made? And it was one of the first micro editions that they made to celebrate like a crazy accomplishment of a guy. And it had a yellow colorway.
Emmanuel Coimbra.
Oh, you got it.
Emmanuel
the Coindre.
Coimbra.
He was the paddle boarder or kayaker.
He paddled kayaks across the Pacific and Atlantic
from like
Ocean.
Paris to New York or something like that.
I remember he deserved his own watch. And there were 2 versions. There was one in platinum, which was the smaller of the micro edition. Then there was the larger one, which was like my Master Compressor Extreme, which was titanium and steel.
Right.
And so, the idea there being like this yellow trim, it looks like the Rossi, but it doesn't have the number on the front. It's a great addition.
It was cool.
And I'll be honest, if anyone has ever deserved his own watch, it's that guy.
Emmanuel Coimbra. And that was like the biggest thing ever because it was only, I think 50 of them or something like that.
And and the platinum one was even scarcer.
And there was an orange version.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember what the orange version commemorated.
It was a boutique edition, I think.
Yeah.
It was a boutique edition.
You know what it was? It was the Sincere boutique edition because they had the IWC with the red orange accents in titanium.
Oh, yeah.
It was the Sincere special edition.
Sincere did special editions 2005, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
And every once in a while you'll see like an IWC and you'll see what is this thing on the movement? Oh, Sincere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
I learned about Sincere in 2013, like when I just got out of the Navy. I went to the 30th anniversary event at the FP Journe boutique. I don't know why they invited me. I got on their mailing list somehow. I met Journe. And I met some guys from Singapore, and I learned about watch culture in the Far East. And, I asked him, like, what watch do you plan to buy? And he's like, well, actually, my wife's family is going to buy me a wedding gift. And they said, buy a watch if you want a watch. And I said, of course I want a watch. And so, they're at FP Journe in an era when you could actually see real inventory.
Oh, come on.
And there was a Chronomètre Bleu in stock that night.
Like $16,000.
And his wife's family bought that watch out of the case in a Journe dealer on demand at an event where Journe himself was present. Try that today. Just walk into a Journe dealer from Singapore, no prior history with the New York boutique. Yeah, I want the chronometre blue. Okay, we'll package that up for you.
Oh, even better. I'll take the 5-watch set. The stainless steel
my-
38 millimeter 5-watch set. That you remember we saw that set?
Yeah, I do. That was the end of the 38 millimeter case line. But
Yeah.
even back then, I mean, with the chronometre blue, it was like a $20,000 watch. Now today, before the tariffs, early in 2025, I think it was up to 42,200 Swiss franc. So it's not a $20,000 watch
Yeah,
now.
but the secondary is like $100,000 for
Which
a
is why they can
chronometer
ask what
blue.
they do now.
And I was captivated by that watch for its use of tantalum. And for the fact that Panerai was one of the first companies to use tantalum in their special edition Panerais.
Yeah.
And that's when I learned it had the highest melting point. It was a pain in the ass to work with. And at that point, it was Panerai and Hublot and AP that did tantalum watches.
Yeah, they had the
They had a Royal Oak tantalum.
there was also a rare JLC Mecha Quartz chronograph from the 80s and the Odysseus line. And guys, if you ever see that, it has
I remember the Odysseus line. They had
tantalum
pointy
case.
pushers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was like 5 of them. It looked like an Armatron.
It was a weird looking thing, I'm not going to lie. And it had a combination of a tantalum case co-molded with gold and then a dial of tantalum flakes. If you ever find that little like caliber 630 Mecha Quartz Odysseus tantalum chrono, don't let that get away. It got away from me and I always regretted it.
No kidding. That was one that got away, huh?
So in 2013, I start writing for 47th Street dealers.
So you were writing for 47th Street dealers?
Yeah, because initially when I got out of the Navy, I had jobs lined up in cable news. But what happened was, I wanted to just I was almost like on a delayed entry program where I had a few months where I could see if I could get into the watch industry because I loved watches at that point. And by this point, people my age in the United States were all about watches.
Yeah.
You've got Ariel Adams with a blocked watch.
Of
You've
course.
got Ben Clymer with
Yeah.
Hodinkey.
Sure.
And
Analog Shift now is coming in.
all
and-
these people
Yeah.
who are my age, and now it's very native. It doesn't feel like I'm out of place. But I go
Right.
to 47th Street, and I find these families, and a lot of them are very clannish and closed.
The Lucarians.
Very, very personal. And what they don't want to do, because with jewelry and gems, you don't really want to trust people from the outside because it's a small circle of trust. These things are so small, they're high value. You really need to believe in the people you're working with, and that's why they always, kept it very close to the vest and in the family. And a lot of times, if they didn't have family in the U.S., they would go back to, their family in either Israel or Eastern Europe, and those people would do things like web support and tech support. And so if they didn't have U.S. family, they'd go back to the old country, and, they
Sure.
would find family members who could help them there. But what I could do that none of them could do, because they were all coming out of jewelry and gems, they wanted to get into watches, but they didn't know a lot about watches. So I was working freelance for a lot of them, ghostwriting blogs and copywriting websites and writing descriptions of watches and
Yeah,
helping
because it was
to-
all about the
you know,
keywords. It was all about getting it out there.
SEO back then,
Google
but-
would find you.
and also curating the product where they knew gems, they didn't know watches. It's like, okay, I've got this Rolex and it's got this. It's a Datejust with a rotating bezel. Is that real? I'm like, yeah, it's a turnograph. That's a cool watch. I can tell you a lot about that. And so I was writing for a lot of them, and a lot of them were using the same copy that I supplied because I also realized that if you were shopping 47th Street, you might see a Royal Oak offshore, and then maybe there's 3 different dealers that are all listing it, and that watch
they're
goes
all
up.
selling the same damn watch.
Yeah, and that they're all going to use my copy, so it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be writing for 3, I want to get like a little bit from all of you because you're all using the same copy and you're all selling the same watch. There's 3 listings for Royal Oak offshore, but that watch only exists in one example.
Yeah.
So I would realize very quickly there was a lot of shared inventory on 47th Street, and then there was that sort of intersection of gems and watches, which I really wasn't into. But
Yeah.
if you wanted a diamond encrusted Franck Muller, that was like the place to go. So I broke into luxury watches through pre-owned on 47th Street because I could offer the idiomatic English watch literate web copy that was very hard to source from all these old families that had
Sure.
been in gems for generations.
Sure.
And so I was often like the outsider. And so I saw all sorts of things like consummation of deals, operations inside of family, the relationship between people who are still overseas and those in the U.S. and how they operate more or less like one business unit sometimes. And it was just an interesting thing because the culture of 47th Street, if you're an outsider, you could live in New York a lifetime, shop there regularly, and never see the inside of it. So
No,
it's kind of a
for
cool
sure.
window into an unusual kind of subculture for me.
No doubt.
I learned a lot, and it was definitely, it was like, how to describe this? It was like the Crucible. Because for most of these people, I would write articles for $15, full length, 800 to 1,000 words.
$15.
And so I would write for 12 hours a day. And so people ask me, like, Tim, how'd you learn so much about watches? And I'm like, months upon months of writing, 12 or more hours a day about every watch in the inventory of 47th Street dealers. And almost none of them are ADs of anything.
No.
I don't know, maybe like 7 Friday or something.
Sure.
But
Yes, I'm Friday.
so I was encountering everything, every watch ever made coming at me like a blizzard, and I had to know what I was talking about to earn my $15 an article. So it was,
And you didn't have AI, and you didn't even have, you could Google stuff on the internet, but it was more about people like saying the wrong things.
Yeah, it was horrible.
You pull off an eBay listing and half of it's wrong.
to research a watch and come up with this article, I might have to research for like an entire day and filter out all the crap. So,
For sure.
someone claiming a watch made in 1995 was actually made in 1985. That's not helpful. So it was like for a year before I joined WatchUWant, it was sort of this like wristwatch boot camp where anything and everything was coming fast and furious. I had to work high volume to make ends meet money-wise, and I had to be ready to talk about anything. I wasn't like the guy who worked in a boutique that carries 6 brands.
Yeah, sure.
And he goes to his brand trainings and he knows those 6 brands. I had to know everything ever made forever, and it was that shotgun effect for so long that made me like who I am today, or at least who I was when I joined WatchUWant.
Sure.
And then I saw even more.
So you remember? So 2013 was when you met with my right hand, Shannon Beck from WatchUWant in a meeting, in a chance meetup on the street almost, right, in New York City, right?
Yeah, there was, of all stupid things, it was a notice on a blog, because I was looking at watchuwant.com on a regular basis because I loved watches, and you guys always had great photos back then.
Yeah,
And
we did. That was, it was always a massive focus, was I want to have the best watch photos.
And I remember you had a photo of the Duomet chronograph with a pusher adjuster, and I didn't learn until many years later that wasn't supposed to be there. And I remember racking, for years, I racked my mind trying to figure out why that was there.
Because we included the pusher.
Yeah, from like another, it was like from the Duomet Quantième Lunaire. And it was with the chronograph, and I'm like, what am I missing?
There's no pushers.
What am I missing?
There's nothing to push.
That vexed me, but I saw, at one point you had a blog, and I saw there was a notice for a copywriter on the blog, and I'm like, well, it doesn't ever hurt to have more clients. So I was getting my car serviced at Toyota, and I responded to the ad on the blog. Shannon Beck was in town on vacation with her family, and she's like, well, I'm going to be in town on vacation with, my husband, my kids, and my sister. I can meet you in New York City for a few minutes. And I did meet her. We met at Dean and DeLuca. The crucial details, she was wearing a Zenith Daytona, and she was impressed that I knew it was the Zenith Daytona.
Do you remember what watch you were wearing?
Mm-hmm. At the time, I would have been wearing, you got to realize at the time I was wearing my Seamaster.
Uh-huh.
So when I came down to interview, and you're like, well, let's do like the second level interview. Now I'm going to meet OJ. Then I wore my Amvox too. But initially,
That's
it was my
right. I
Seamaster.
remember you wore the Amvox. That was the push button crystal.
And I just reviewed one of those today, and I mentioned it in the video. This was my WatchUWant interview watch.
You're right. I so remember that
But
watch.
the crucial detail with the interview with Shannon was that it ended with me spilling coffee on her.
Yes, but the detail was that she was here for her husband's cousin's bar mitzvah, who's a fraternity brother of mine, in fact.
Oh, okay.
But she was in her all-white outfit and going to the bar mitzvah later that afternoon in all white because the theme was all white. And somehow you got like the door pushed on you and you spilled coffee all over her.
Yeah, I was trying to do the gentlemanly thing, and I spilled coffee all over her. You had a good interview if you still get the job.
After you spilled coffee, she had to go to Express to get a whole new outfit, she told me.
And then, I went down to Florida, and it was basically like a 3-day trial, and I was copywriting, and I was working to get inventory up because descriptions had always been sort of like a problem on the website, and the challenge was always to have someone who could copyright the website and be watch literate. So I did that for 3 days, and I remember one of the guys looked at me. He's like, that chair you're sitting in? I'm like, yes. He's like, that's the ejection seat. Everyone who's ever sat there has gotten fired. I'm like,
come on.
and I remember thinking like,
Yeah, we had some turnover back in the day.
no, but I think,
But I never made you cry.
no, never did.
I just remember you coming in and me thinking to myself, finally, there's fucking someone around who knows something about watches. And then it was like, OJ, that's not right. And next thing you know, I'm starting to realize all the bullshit I'm working my way through. And you're like, that's not right.
Teddy
That's
Roosevelt,
not right. I
San
thought
Juan Hill.
I'd make up shit. I'd be like, oh, it's a hybrid between a quartz and an automatic, explaining like an eco drive. And you're like, no, OJ, actually, the way it works. I'm like, no shit.
It wasn't my intention. Maybe I'm not good at taking social cues, but it's like I always thought I was doing it in good faith. So yeah, but
I was like, oh, I'm not even gonna try to fucking explain this. I'll let Tim figure it out.
and so yeah, you'd have a client and be like Richard Mille RM39. It's like, here, Tim, deal with this. Show him how to use the slide rule. I'm like, thank God I learned that in the Navy.
Right.
Like how to use
right.
the slide rule on a Navitimer or RM39.
Do you remember I think he was a Dutch guy, and he had a massive Jaeger collection.
Yeah.
Do you remember? He subsequently died.
Really?
Yeah, he had a heart attack on the golf course, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh my gosh.
He was a Dutch guy, and he was the one who had that. I think he had like the Jaeger with the sliding louvers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Or else
that
was one of them.
That was either the Reverso Eclipse or it was the Repetition à Redo, which was a minute repeater.
Yeah, it was the repetition. Yeah. And then the other one he had was some kind of minute repeater round, master.
Was this the guy who was an art collector too?
I think so. He was a banker out of like Grand Cayman.
And I remember
by way
we were
of
looking at
Amsterdam.
the watches and we're like, well, how do we even sell these? Because they're so distinctive, they're going to immediately know they're his. You could cover up the serial
Yeah, we
number.
sold them by you talking about them.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it. Because no one else really could talk about them. Like, yeah, it's a minute repeater, No, it's more than that.
And, it's like I would... I'd start a morning, I'd memorize 50 Rolex references. Like, I never stopped hitting the books. That's the thing people forget. If you want to be an authority in this industry, and I don't consider myself an expert, I consider myself a student. I'm a student. There are people... Philippe Dufour is an expert. I'm a student. But you got to keep hitting the books with a vengeance. It's like music. If you don't play your scales and you don't practice, you take your skills for granted, they atrophy. You're a major league pitcher. You fall in love with your curveball, you lose your fastball.
Sure.
So I've never stopped drilling references and history and models and people and places and times and important events. To this day, I still probably spend 2 to 3 hours a day reading about watches. And so I would say that for me, the fun is in the joy of discovery. If this is going to be the 70th Oyster Perpetual I've seen in the last 18 months, I'm going to do a workman-like job and make sure that if there is any sense of repetition or fatigue, that it doesn't come across in the video, because I want the person who watches the video who's really in love with this watch to hear it from someone who's a fan, to hear it from someone who's bringing out the best in this watch, like I'm its advocate in court, and I'm trying to bring out its best facets to the judge. It's not lying, it's not hyping,
Sure.
but I want there to be a palpable sense of joy in that I really believe
some
in
might
this
call
watch.
that pimping.
A little bit, but I think the difference between pimping and the difference between what I do is I think what I do is done in good faith. I would never tell a lie or oversell something, but what I will do is I'll try to give you context and I'll try to give you facts.
Yeah.
And
I think the context is everything. Facts are great, but context is what you remember.
So what's fun for me, what I guess I lost is that I lost that sense when I was new of every single watch and every single brand being a profound discovery.
Sure. That sense of wonderment and novelty.
Yeah. I'm so familiar with some of these things now that whereas, in the past I could barely pronounce the name of the guy who made the watch, now he's in my phone.
Sure.
So, that changes your perspective a little bit. So for me, when I find something that's truly new, it's always very exciting. And that's why, I've been talking about it for years. I would love someday to be in watchmaking. Look, I don't know if I'm going to be the top gun, but I would like to at least be the guy who gets the certificate and passes the bar and takes that test out in Harrison, Ohio, or at the WOSTEP. And
right, Lidditz or one of those guys.
The guy who actually gets the certificate and proves he could do it. And I think for me, that's what I have left to prove, because this, it doesn't matter how smart you are or how well read you are. it is a manual dexterity challenge, and you've got to be able to work up to passing that challenge. And nobody gets a free pass. And I think that's kind of cool for me, because then I'm in the same boat as everyone else. I don't have an inherent advantage. Maybe in terms of the engineering, I know how all the stuff works.
Right.
But you got to do it with your hands. You know, it's like you could be the best theoretical doctor on earth, but you're not a surgeon unless you've got a surgeon's hands. And I want to find out. I want to know. I've had some setbacks, you know, where I walked into it. Maybe I didn't know what I was getting into. And I'm like, well, this is quite humbling. So having practiced a lot now on my own, I think once I'm done doing this, whatever this is, and wherever this goes, if I don't go, you know, I mentioned I started out like on a law track. If I go back to law, it would be for the right reasons, not because I want to be able to afford a Maserati.
Sure.
Or I want to be able to repair a Maserati. They both cost a lot of money. No, it would because, you know.
But it seems like you'd probably have more enjoyment repairing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking it apart and putting it back together.
I think I would ultimately have more fun fixing machines, which is why.
Do you take apart your watches?
Yeah, I've been into a couple of them, and they've gone back together and they've worked. I took apart the Grandpa watch, which is an automatic. It's a rotor automatic Omega with a date, so you know I'm at least that good. I've taken apart and put back together 7750s. They still work. The chronograph functions, the calendars, the automatic system. But you know what? Like there's good enough, and then there's passing a test, and a bench test is very exacting. There's fabrication, there's regulation. Mm-hmm. You know, the person who tests you is under no obligation to pass you, and for me that's exciting, because that's where I get that joy of discovery again. That's like, okay, Tim, you're now a rookie again.
Yeah, right. Sure.
It's a relief. Mm-hmm. It's a relief to be a rookie again.
Yeah, there's novelty there, right? There's like I said, a sense of wonderment. Right.
Yeah. So after this, it would be either go into law for the right reasons this time, or go into watchmaking and complete your education. You've got that one half. You know, you probably know things about watches that people with 30 years of watchmaking don't know. So could you imagine if you unified the manual skills with the knowledge? To me, that would be like I'd be the complete Tim Mosso. That would be great.
Interesting.
So if there's any watchmaker out there who wants to take a bit of an older apprentice on, I'm available. And it's AI proof. That's a nice thing.
You're so good at what you do. I mean, you are the most prolific authority in watches, and that's not enough for you.
Prolific, yes. I think I checked the other day, and I'm now over 13,600 videos, of which around, I would say, 12,000 are just the reviews. And that's just on YouTube. I've got another 3,001 minutes on Instagram.
Wow.
The way I've been able to do
That's amazing.
is try to stick to the facts.
Right.
And I've never needed editing. I've never edited a video.
That's, you say that like, I've watched you make these videos. I've had videos with you. 12 minutes, not a single or I think, or let me no, wait. Like it's almost like it's scripted, but I know it's not.
Once upon a time, that was supposed to be like my meal ticket. I was in high school. I was on the debate team and the speech team, and I would go to both of the tournaments. I would go to speech was generally where you'd see more of the women, and debate was where you'd see more of the men. And I qualified for the New York Championships in both speech and debate. And in speech, I did extemporaneous speech, where they would give you a topic pulled out of the blue, such as, has the sinking of the Kursk undermined the authority of Vladimir Putin? And then you'd have to speak for 5 minutes on that with a few minutes to prep.
Right.
So that was sort of I remember I was so stressed when I did that. I would get a pit in my stomach going to a speech tournament. Debate was orderly, thoughtful, rational, and planned.
And prepped, right.
If So for me, that was easier to do. I was good at extemporaneous speaking, but if you told me that extemporaneous speech, I was good at speaking that way. If I was sick at every tournament, I was so stressed. I couldn't sleep the night before. I was so strung out. I'm thinking to myself, this is a hell of a way to spend your weekends. But I was good at it. And if you told me at that time, this is how you're going to make your money someday. I did the debate, which was easy because people would have 3 points. They'd have 4 cross-X questions. It'd be like ships in the night in high school debate. It wasn't terribly sophisticated. But extemporaneous speaking left no place to hide. It's just you, a topic of which you know nothing until you're given it at the tournament. And if you fold if you fail to address the question, if you trail off, if you say or you double clutch, or you're not able to fill the time. Boy, do they beat you down, the judges, with the comment sheets. So this was the most stressful thing I did in a year when I was taking 4 college courses in high school, this weekend speech tournament thing. If you told me I was going to make my money doing that several times a day, I would have told you I'm joining the French Foreign Legion and I'm giving it all up. No
Right.
college, no profession. I don't want to do this. Whatever leads me to that, I want to avoid. And today, just before we spoke, I shot 5 single pass watch reviews. So it's
Without a single a single huh, or a what, or a backtrack, or anything else.
I would have run away from home and joined the circus if you told me I was going to have to speak extemporaneously 5 to 15 times a day without a net for a living for years on end. So kids, if you're out there, those speech tournaments, try it out because it might take you places you never imagined.
Amazingly so. Our kid's babysitter was one of the top debaters and speech kids, and it got him into Wharton.
Yeah, I will tell you, it's one of those things that sets you apart.
That's for sure.
Everyone's going to play a sport. Not everyone can stand and deliver.
And if you talk about now, like that's a life skill that's going away. That's going away. So as you said, kids, yeah, speech and debate's probably a great life skill for if you want to be successful, if you want to be a speaker, or what I consider you to be, which is a thought leader. Like you're an accidental watch thought leader almost.
You got that right about accidents. They're
And
good accidents.
So here's my question for you. If you look back on this journey, what seminal event allowed you to say, yeah, you know what? I think I can do this. I think I can make a living in the watch space. You know, was there a particular moment or thing or happening or, you know, just a switch where it was like, yeah.
I would say that boot camp for me, honestly, proved that sometimes good things happen when you take a big risk. And it also showed me how tough I could be because I was not intrinsically that person. And I learned a lesson about myself when I went to boot camp, Navy OCS. I carried that through the rest of my life, and I carry it through to this day. And sometimes if you dare, you win. WatchUWant was a fantastic example of that. And back when the company was very small, and there were very
Talk about
few,
a leap of faith. I mean, you relocated to Florida, not knowing anyone, no family, after a conversation with Shannon on the street. And it was like within days, I think, of that meeting, you were in Florida.
I was, and the chance you took on me at a company where there was very little money for a salaried employee who did not earn his keep in the commissioned sense, that was the big difference maker, that you decided to bring in a pure knowledge worker who was not going to be a salesman, not going to moonlight as a fronter, and pretty much just going to be a mouthpiece for the company and a voice to the world. There was no one else doing anything like that. We had a lot of competitors. They did not have an employee like me.
Yeah.
You and Shannon came up with that idea. You took a chance. You spent real money. You relocated me, and you stuck with me at times when, frankly, the cash flow was a challenge. It was a small company.
Yeah.
You know, John Smith, back in colonial times, he said something to the effect of, "He who does not work, neither shall he eat." And compared to the salesman, I wasn't bringing in the money.
Yeah.
So that was.
You were pure expense, but you know, we recognized your genius day one, and you know, it was also I wanted to be that guy, and I couldn't do it. I didn't have the knowledge base. I didn't have the speaking ability. I didn't have the confidence. I get and talk about a watch. Well, it's a 44. What's the PAM reference? I think
You
it's a
say that you're the mayor.
3062.
You're the mayor of Hollywood, Florida.
You know,
you're everybody's
but, you
buddy.
know,
You're
like I
very
said,
good at that.
We saw it day one and said this guy's is a game changer. And from day one, you know, you fit in like glue to the organization.
Yeah, we had a fun dysfunctional family at WatchUWant, and I'll see if I can find some of the old photos so we can add some color to this when it goes up on the internet. But that was the big difference maker for me. And then I would say the second step was when we set up the studio downstairs, and now I'm going to be in front of the camera because it's one thing to just say, okay, this guy can rattle off a technical deck and
talking hands.
Yeah, the talking
We went
hands.
from talking hands to you being on camera.
And where that eventually led it led me here. We're doing this today. But, I mean, to sit down and interview Max Busser and Philippe Dufour and Carrie Voudelaine and Ludovic Ballois, F.P. Journe, the people I've met and the places it's taken me. I think that first step of breaking into the industry full-time with WatchUWant, the chance you took, and then the move to being in front of the camera, those were the two big fulcrum points of my career to date.
Wow. That's quite humbling, I have to say. And, you know, I'm just so excited for you and that you've been able to, you know, take something that you're so passionate about, that means so much to you, and parlay it into where you are today.
Yeah,
You know?
and so someday, hopefully, people have joked for years that there's going to be a Tim Mosso watch. There may be someday, but I certainly hope that my future is on the artisanal side, because I feel like that is where I can rediscover that joy we all had when we first discovered watches. I can be there again, and I can have that feeling again, doing something that is hard and unfamiliar and humbling and worthwhile.
Sure. Yeah. It's been quite a ride, man. It's been quite a ride, and I've certainly enjoyed, you know, having you be by my side where it started and just watching you grow.
Honestly, it couldn't happen without you, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim, for being our special guest today and allowing us to shoot in your studio. Is just the treat. That's the cherry on the cake.
Well, we'll do a part 2.
100%.
Till next time.
I'll be in next month.